Dr. Darin Deaton is our guest today. You might remember him from episode number 82, where we talked about reaching your highest genetic potential and building muscle at any age. It's definitely one of our most popular episodes. So thanks for coming back, Darin.
You bet. Glad to be here.
Man, so you have been busy since we had you on last time. You've had your hands full with opening a new PT clinic up north. We've got a drought here in Texas that seems to be creating a lot of extra work for you at your ranch. Matter of fact, I see more cowbells than barbells on your Instagram feed lately.
I posted some squats the other day.
So tell our listeners and just tell me what's been going on with you since last time that we talked, because I think it's been a lot.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So for those of y'all that don't know me, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I've got about 3 decades of orthopedic clinical experience. I'm a starting strength coach. I've been a starting strength coach, I think, since 2011 or 12. I was on seminar staff with Starting Strength 2 for barbell training or barbell education and their seminar series. And then we own a group. I'm a partner in a group, founding partner in a group of physical therapy clinics up in the Northeast Tarrant County, Fort Worth area. And then we just opened a location. I opened a location that's under a different brand. The one in the Fort Worth area is called Rehab Therapy Specialist. It's about a 20-year-old practice business. And like I said, we have 6 locations. The one here in Stephenville, which is closer to where I actually live now. I live in a ranch in the Erath County area. I will not give you the exact disclosed location. But
it'll be in the show notes for this episode.
Don't do it. It's called DPT, Physical Therapy and Performance. And I actually have a business partner there that was an employee of mine when I was when he was in town. He worked for me for a couple of years. Went to Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine's their DPT program, and then did an internship at our practice and came to work for me for a couple of years. And then one thing led to another. He's a local boy from Stephenville, so he and I decided about 1.5 years ago to launch this new rural-based, rural community practice setting and model. And so we opened about 2.5, 3 months ago, and we're just blowing the doors off of it. It's awesome.
That's awesome.
We treat a lot of Western lifestyle individuals, a lot of rodeo athletes, and a lot of just everyday Joes. There's a CrossFit gym in this town. There's a barbell gym in this town. So we treat just about everything here. So about the drought, we live on a cattle ranch. We run a small cow-calf operation. And for your listeners and for you, too, we, starting next spring, will be ranch to table with all of our beef sourcing. So we are gearing.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, we're gearing our calf herd right now to be ready to have our first harvest of calves for our own marketing and selling to the public, whether it be on online sales through an online website launch that we're doing for the 5M Ranch and Cattle Company, or whether it would be through friends and family members. We're going to have an office there at the ranch where if individuals don't want to pay for shipping, because we dry ice ship everything, then they can come out to the ranch. They can have a glass of wine, have a glass of whiskey, a beer, a tea, a water, whatever their choice of fluid is.
A protein shake.
Yeah, a protein shake. And they can even take a little ride with us on the buggy. They can see the herd. They can get a feel and a connection for where their food comes from and some of the raising techniques that we use. We're an integrity beef, what's called integrity beef producer, which is done through the Noble Research Institute out of Oklahoma. So we adhere to certain beef raising techniques that are beef quality assurance techniques. I'm beef quality assurance certified. Our goal is to take what we've done in fitness and to take kind of my fitness background and my healthcare background and provide the best quality sourced, antibiotic-free, hormone-free, as much as possible, GMO grain-free, either grass-fed, grass-raised, and range-fed beef, or we'll do a finished beef product too for people who want more of the finished beef taste. And then we'll do our own harvesting through a private processor, and we're excited. I'm excited about that. I'm crazy
That's awesome.
excited about good quality beef in the marketplace. And there's a lot of good private ranchers like us that are doing this because, plain simple, we're tired of giving away our herds too.
Yeah. Two questions came to mind during that.
Sure.
Number one, are your cows going to be able to squat and deadlift more than the average cow? And secondly, if somebody likes the sound of this and they want to kind of get in on the ground floor, how do they get more information from you on that?
Right now, we're too early in the process to have anything available for consumers yet, but probably within the next 3 months, the next quarter, we will actually have a pre-order listing where we're going to do pre-order listing. We'll have everything from where we can do a family bundle where if you wanted to order 10 pounds or 20 pounds or 50 pounds of beef with certain cuts, and those would be, those family bundles would actually be preset cuts. It would have ground beef, T-bones, ribeye, filet, flank steak, roast, whatever the cut is. And then we also will be able to sell quarters, halves, and wholes. And so if someone wants to do that, we'll have a pre-order list. Once, and they actually will know, they'll be sent a picture of their calf that's going to be harvested. So they'll know exactly which calf is going to be harvested. They'll know their health statistics. Once that calf is harvested, then from there, we work with the processor to determine what cuts they want out of that specific calf if they want to do custom processing like that. And then we'll take delivery of it. And they can come up to the ranch and pick it up and enjoy it.
This is amazing.
Yeah. My goal is twofold. Number one, provide good quality beef for the marketplace that's fitness and health oriented, high omega-3, high good quality protein source, antibiotic free, hormone free, steroid free. And then also it's to connect people to the cattle ranching industry and connect people to their food and help understand what really goes into raising cattle. It's not rocket science, even though there's a lot of science in it, and I geek out on all the food nutrition science and the bovine science. But it's also important that we understand that the beef doesn't come from the grocery store. It comes from people. It comes from people who are caring for those animals. I mean, I lost a calf the other day, and I was depressed for two weeks. So,
yeah, I get it.
We really do care for the creations that we've been given stewardship over, and we want to share that with other people. We want to connect people to that lifestyle too. So.
I'll tell you what, since you don't have something set up yet, if anybody listening to this wants to know more when it is available, just send me an email at jonathan@digitalbarbell.com, and I'll curate a list and then get in touch with Darin when it is a ready thing and turn you guys on to it.
That's awesome.
Okay, so awesome. I want to talk about not just cows and whiskey today, but about injury and coming back from injuries and kind of what a sustainable training model can look like. But as I was kind of prepping for this and scrolling back through your Instagram, I came across your annual birthday post where you put the video of yourself doing your backflip, and you wrote a great caption. I really liked the day that you wrote it, and rereading it yesterday kind of brought back some of those feelings. So I want to talk about a couple of those things if you're game.
Yeah, shoot.
So the first thing that stood out to me, and I'm going to read this as a quote, you said, "Dig the well before it's dry. It's easy to start doing something when you absolutely have to, but in many cases, the damage is done. Invest in what you don't need now because you are going to need it before you know it." Talk to us about kind of your philosophy around that.
Well, I think I've been taught that since I was crazy young, little. My family has a farm and ranch background, but I grew up in a blue-collar family. And my parents always instilled that in me, in the sense that you prepare for something before you need that resource. And when you're talking about the whole, I guess, analogy of digging a well before the well goes dry, it's like the squirrel does, right? The squirrel stores up food for the winter. He's not in winter, or she's not in winter, but they know that the winter's coming. They know biologically, their body senses that the winter is coming, and I better store up food when there will be no food available. And so I think as humans, one of the things that's hard about our health and fitness, and that's being proactive. That's being engaged in the process, not allowing our culture to pull us along into whatever direction it wants to pull us along when it comes to food quality, processed foods, processed carbohydrates, when it comes to the drinks we drink, when it comes to the lifestyles that we have. I mean, here's a great point we could have a whole podcast on. What do we think the pandemic's done to people's sedentary lifestyles? Now when, I don't know what percentage, I think it's over 40% of the people work from home now. to me, I've seen an uptick and a rise in people with diagnoses problems that relate to sedentary lifestyle, postural issues, low back pain from sitting all day long in front of a computer, carpal tunnel, neck pain, all these different things, because we're not being as active as we need to be as a culture. And so I think it's crazy important that we do the hard before the hard is needed. We prepare beforehand. You know? And I use this one example to my patients almost daily. I used it yesterday. I remember the conversation with an older lady. I said, you know, she was having a lot of back and neck and shoulder pain, and she works from home now. In the last 18 months, she's not gone back to the workforce, so she doesn't have to walk around. She doesn't have to leave her car and walk to the plant and do all these other things. And I said to her, I said, you know what, you think about it. Think about humans as an animal species. I know we're higher level thinking. We have cognition and didactic reasoning and logic and all these other things. But I said, think about humans as just any other animal species. And I said, what animal species has a good quality lifestyle that doesn't maximize, and this comes back to our other podcast, its own maximum genetic, both cognitive, emotional, spiritual, physical capacity or performance? So when you think about a human, if a human thinks they can live in artificial light in front of a computer screen all day long and stay healthy, it's not going to happen. And so what do we have to do? We have to do the thing that needs to be done before we truly need it. And along the way, guess what happens? We have this amazing quality of life. I was an average gymnast growing up. I mean, I literally was. I was an average gymnast, nothing special. And people are like, wow, you must have been an amazing gymnast. I'm like, no, I've just been practicing backflips ever since I started them. And I do them every year, several times a year. And it's kind of something I have in my mind to say, this is hard. The average individual can't do it. I have the capacity to do it. So why not maintain that or even improve that over the years? So I think that that's important. Why do I lift 3 days a week and do conditioning a couple days a week and live the active lifestyle I'll do? Because I actually need it every single day in what I do. There's a lot of individuals that work a more sedentary job and they don't necessarily need it, but they do. And that's the scary thing, is that if we don't recognize how important it is before it's important, you see, that's the readiness to change model, right? In biocycle, hang on, let me get this right. in
psychological?
Yeah, it's in the biopsychological theory. Basically says, I'm saying that wrong. I know I'm saying that wrong. Well, I wasn't a psychology major.
I'll edit that out. Yes. I was.
Okay. But in psychology theory, basically there's this thing called readiness to change model. Basically it says this: humans don't change until there is a perceived risk great enough to get them to change. Mm-hmm. There's an old story that I use with my patients every single day, and that is this. There were two old men sitting on a porch, and there was an old hound dog sitting between two rocking chairs. And every now and then the old man would rock back on his rocking chair, and he would rock back on that dog's tail, and the dog would bark or squeal every time. And eventually the one old man who wasn't rocking back looked at the other old man and said, why every time do you rock back, he squeals so loud? Why didn't you just move? He says, because it just doesn't hurt bad enough yet. And that is so true with the way we are as humans. We've got to have a big enough reason, a big enough perceived risk. You know, the person that goes to the pulmonary doctor and they find out they have a little spot on their lung and they're a heavy smoker. Guess what? That might be a big enough impetus to get them to want to have a readiness to change, to make a change. So we have to discipline ourselves to be strong enough internally and develop enough self-will and free agency to where we say, I'm willing to change. And that's what digging the well before the well gets dry is all about.
Mm-hmm. It's it's this curse really that both progress in a positive direction and whatever you want to call it, progress in the negative direction happens slowly. That makes this all so difficult. We don't see the instant reward of choosing the healthy option one time. We don't see the negative consequences of skipping one workout. So it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
There's no urgency there. The analogy we always use, it would be better if the 6th Pop-Tart just killed you and that was it. You were just over. Like, it's all these little things that we don't know that we're doing, or we do know that we're doing, but we don't think there's going to be a consequence that add up to, sometimes the wake up call that we get. And that's what we want to avoid.
And it's like injury too. We have this phenomena in physiology called cumulative trauma, and cumulative trauma basically means that trauma builds up over time, say in a tendon belly or a muscle or a bony structure or it could be soft tissue, whatever it is. It's cardiac system, pulmonary system, part of the viscera, the brain, the neurological system and nerves. And so cumulative trauma happens over time. And so the human body is very good at maintaining a reasonable amount of performance when it's being thrown a ton of junk. It just is really good at doing that. The problem with that is that it's too good at doing that. And sometimes we don't recognize that we're declining over time more rapidly than we should based on, again, our maximum genetic performance. My grandmother lived to be 99 years old, my mother's mother. My mother lived to be 67 years old. My birth father lived to be 47 years old. So when you look at that, if you looked at my parents, you would say you're not going to have much longevity. But if you look at my grandparents, my grandmother was 99, my grandfather was 96, my other grandmother on my father's side, my birth father's side, turned 100 last year. So when you look at that, you say to yourself, okay, how can I maximize my body's genetic performance? Now, no one's perfect. We were talking about whiskey before this show. No one's perfect. We all got things that we like to enjoy. But I tell people this way. It's all about moderation. And it's also all about people like to use the 80-20 rule. I'd probably say it probably should be more like 85-15 rule, 90,
so true.
90-10 rule. Because if you tell people 80-20, it's like 60-40.
Right. You got to give a little buffer in there.
It's like telling someone they're reasonably strong and then they stop lifting. And the guy's squatting 205, and he weighs 200 pounds. That's not strong. And so it's all perception. And so I think that you're right. I think we need to be aware of that gradual progression of cumulative trauma in our health and fitness, and it's a gradual decline. I talk to my patients all the time about obesity and about being overly nourished. In my medical records anymore, I don't say obesity. I say the client was overly nourished. So if you come to me for physical therapy and you read your exam and it says overly nourished, you know what I'm saying. So
right, overfed.
Yeah, exactly. But overfed animals are not healthy. I don't care what the world. I mean, does that mean that I accept everyone in every shape and size? Yes, I do. But it's just not as healthy for you. And so one of the things that's interesting that people don't think about is I've seen people basically go and gain 1 to 1.5 pounds a year. Well, if you gain 1 to, let's say, 2 pounds a year, in 20 years you've gained 20 to 40 pounds. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
And during that time, you just ingrained those habits that got you there, which are going to be even harder to break.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
We're getting some much-needed rain out here in the hill country, and we have a metal roof on our office. Can you hear that rain coming down out there?
I thought it was static in my microphone.
No.
Hey, why don't you send that stuff up north, brother? Send it up more.
I think it came from the north. I guess it just missed you, but man, we need this bad. Our grass it looks like hay out here in our yard.
Well, we have 9 ponds on our place, and so for people who are from up north or other parts of the country, we have 9 tanks. A tank would be about anywhere from an acre to several acres. We have 9 of them on our ranch, and 7.5 of them are completely empty. We have a water well that's a windmill. It's about 100 to 120-year-old well. Yesterday, they pulled it to work on it, and it caved in on itself. It's so dry, we lost the well yesterday. And so we're going to have to redig the well and move the windmill to another location. But we're in dire need of water. I water all of our cattle, and and our ranch right now through co-op water. So you can imagine what that feels like.
Wow. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to assume that the audio is going to come through on this and that the rain doesn't last forever. But I do want to move on to the main topic of today, which is, like I said, talking about injury. And,
Sure.
Whether you train or not, you are going to have probably some kind of injury in your life. Another benefit of training is that at least if you're going to have one, at least you can be fit and strong in the process. We already talked about your experience, formally with your education and in practice, working with people in clinic. When you look at like our target demographic, which are people who do or have done CrossFit, or people who lift weights, or they just want to be fit, they're doing something, group classes, something. What are some of the common classifications of injury, kind of at a high level, that we see, and how can we kind of break those down based on level of severity,
Sure.
for lack of a better word?
So if we kind of went from least severe to most severe, we would start with something like a sprain and strain of a muscle belly. It could be the musculotendinous junction, but we just say a muscle strain. Usually, and all of these injuries, as a therapist, what I think about is basically this. There is a physiological timeline of normal healing time frame for every tissue in the human body. And if we wanted to put it kind of on a timeline scale of least amount of time chronologically to the most amount of time, then we would go something like this: skin, muscle, bone, tendon and bone you could interchange, ligament, nerve. And it would kind of go like that, okay, in regards to the tissues that are normally injured when it comes to fitness and health and training, all right? So nerves take forever to heal. They heal very slowly. Ligaments take forever to heal. They heal very slowly. Bone heals a little bit faster. Tendons heal a little bit faster. And muscle heals really fast. And skin heals incredibly fast. Why is that? The reason for that is that from the right hand of the scale, in regards to quickest time frame, to the left hand of the scale, the longest amount of time, it's all based on how much nutrition each of those tissues receive. So as a therapist, when I'm examining a patient and I look for a date of injury, I look for a particular incident. Maybe there was an incident where they said, I was in the bottom of a squat, I went to change direction and get the balance out of the bottom, and when I did, I felt a pop in my hamstring. And now it's sore right in that spot. And that happened a month ago, okay? Well, based on where the soreness is, and I know it's 30 days out, it tells me what tissue was involved. It tells me how far along it should be healed based on appropriate healing timelines. And it also tells me how I can either rehabilitate that or start them back into their training, which I hope they've done after day one if it's a muscle tear, okay, or a muscle injury. So that's kind of how I think about this. So when we're talking about nutrition for the human body and injury recovery, we're talking about oxygen. We're talking about all the muscle metabolites, all the things that the muscle needs, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the chemicals that the muscle gets for it to recover itself, or the other tissues get for them to recover itself. And all of that stuff comes from the blood. It all comes from the capillary system and the arterial system, and then it all gets filtered out through the lymphatics and the venous system. So think about it this way, and here's the best way to think about this as a user, for your user audience, your listening audience. It's this: if a tissue is highly innervated, it has a lot of nerves, okay, and a tissue has a lot of blood supply to it. In other words, it bleeds a lot. When it is injured, it heals faster. The less blood and less innervation and less nutrition that it gets, it heals slower. Here's a perfect example. Ligaments have very little vascularity. They have very little blood supply to them. Well, they heal very, very slow. And most of these tissues in a mature adult don't truly heal. They scar. There's a collagen reformation, collagen scarring process that occurs during that time frame where the tissue can mend itself. But if muscle is like this normally in its fibers, and it's myosin and actin fibers. We call that the sarcomere, which is the functioning unit of the muscle. A little bit of science high tech for you there. Geek out on that, folks. So
for those of y'all that aren't watching the video version of this, imagine like you're putting your hands together to pray, that kind of thing. That's what he's doing.
And slide your fingers in and out from each other in the grooves, in the void grooves in between the fingers. That's the muscle. Well, when the muscle heals, it heals like this. It heals like this.
He's now crossing his fingers.
So that's a lot less.
They're restructuring.
That's right. And that's a lot less able to be pliable and to be elastic. It's more plastic. So what happens is, a good example would be when we tear a muscle. That's why it's so important to immediately load that muscle within a very short time frame after the injury with the proper loads and the appropriate loads, so that as that new scar is forming and as that healed spot in the muscles forming, let's just call it a patch. Once that patch is healing, we want to make sure that it's sliding and gliding with the other fibers of the normal muscle tissue. And the greatest example.
But Darin, aren't you aware that this flies in the face of conventional wisdom of take it easy and don't do anything after you get hurt?
Yeah, well, here's a perfect example. About 5 years ago, I treated a young man at our clinic in Grapevine, Texas. He was a senior at a local high school. He had 6 hamstring tears over his high school football career. His father was a D1 football player. His brother at the time was playing for University of North Carolina as a defensive back. So he had great genetics. The kid had the most freakish power performance I've ever seen for a smaller athlete. He was a middle linebacker, but he was small. But his vertical was crazy. It was like 34 inches. His long jump was crazy. He just had this explosive power. But no one in his rehabilitation process over the last 6 times had ever appropriately rehabbed him. So when I got him, I was filling him for my business partner, and he had just gotten him as a patient. And I started squatting him and deadlifting him and doing Nordic hamstrings and doing RDLs on him the first day I saw him. And he still was purple. He still had bruising and swelling in that area. And we just graded those activities. We just modified those activities so that he could perform them. And we used what's called the STAR muscle rehab technique, which is, created, and it's really only for muscle bellies and muscular injuries. It's not for tendons and ligaments and bony injuries. But we use that technique, and you can go online and look up that technique. But basically,
that's STAR with 2 R's, STARR.
Yes. And we immediately started loading that tissue. We finished his rehab. Then after his rehab, he came to me as a strength client. And for 3 months, I worked for him. He started, I think, out with a back squat of like 260 for a 1 RM. When he finished with me 3 months later, he was squatting 415, 420 for a triple. He was deadlifting 500. We worked on his bench and his press and everything else. But the kid eventually, he went to Navarro College. He did not get recruited by UNC. But Navarro College is like a feeder JUCO to a bunch of other universities, and UNC is one of them. And he didn't go to UNC. He eventually got picked up on a full ride to Baylor, and he played his last 3 years at Baylor as a defensive back. And so, but I didn't do anything magical with him. All I did was apply proper physiology, proper pathophysiology, which means when something is damaged, when there's a pathos or an injury or damage to the tissue, and applied that to him as a specimen, as a subject. And we loaded it immediately after the injury and worked through his injury, and then we just did a linear progression, and it wasn't anything fancy, but generally speaking, motion is lotion for the body. You need to get moving. Lubrication is everything when it comes to tendons and ligaments and joints. And you got a bad joint, get it moving, and you got to get moving.
It's so true.
So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, because I do want to talk even a little bit more about coming back from some more specific injuries, not specifics as a protocol for somebody to follow, but just some general guidelines. But I think some of the most common things our clients run into are shoulder tendonitis, elbow tendonitis, shoulder pain that radiates up into the neck, those kinds of things. Are those some of the most common things you see in practice? And why do we tend to get those things? And is there anything we can do to prevent getting them?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the most common injuries would probably be, in a clinical sense, and also in the fitness world, it's probably muscle injuries first, tendon injuries second, ligament injuries third. Neural trauma is a lot less common. It usually involves some type of impact or trauma or overstretch injury, but sometimes nerve injuries occur. And then lastly, bone injuries. I mean, if you've got a bone injury, it's usually from trauma, impact. So, like a contusion on the knee or you had a 45-pound plate drop on your foot and cause a Jones fracture or cause a Liz Frank's, disruption or something like that. So the bony injuries are usually more severe. Now, we can get things where we get a tendonitis at the attachment of the tendon into the bone. And a very common example of that would be like tennis elbow, which is lateral epicondylitis, which is on the outside of the elbow, and then golfer's elbow, which would be medial epicondylitis, which is on the inside of the elbow. And funny enough, golfers get more tennis elbow, and tennis players get more golfer's elbow. But those are some common tendon injuries. And then the other injuries are things like groin tears, adductor pulls, adductor tears of the adductor, the muscles on the inside of the thigh, hamstring tears or hamstring sprains and strains. I see them a lot in the muscle belly in the center, and I also see them sometimes up at what's called the sits bone, which if you're sitting down right now, the bones that you're sitting on are your sits bones. Those are called the ischial tuberosities. Sometimes we'll see an actual disruption of the tendon from that bone. And sometimes I'll see even avulsion fractures where it takes a chunk of bone off with it. So those are some of the common injuries. Shoulder tendonitis, back sprains and strains. You wake up one morning and you go to turn your head in the shower and all of a sudden your neck's locked up. You see a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
How do we care for all these things? The principles are the same. They're all the same for every single injury. And the principles apply based on the severity of the symptoms. And as a therapist, when I examine a patient, or if you see an orthopedic surgeon or a family practitioner, they're going to evaluate you, find the target tissue, do a differential diagnosis, differentiate it from other things. We want to get rid of what we call lions and tigers, things that, sometimes you get back pain when you have cancer, plain and simple. So we got to rule out those things, and we got to be listening for what we call red flags. Mm-hmm. But a learned practitioner, someone who's got a reasonably good logic and rational mind and experience, can look at most fitness clients, health and fitness clients, or most patients, and quickly then start to zone in and separate all the wheat from the chaff and get into where they actually need to be to figure out what the differentially diagnosed tissue is and how to treat it. But there are some basic principles here that I follow for all my patients and for all my clients. And let me just say this. These principles are easier to apply with my fitness clients than they are my patients. Because once they step into the patient world, they become a patient. And once they become a patient, they can sometimes develop an injured mindset. In the fitness world, they're already engaged in a fitness program. I may be their coach. I might not be their coach. I do a lot of consults for starting strength coaches in starting strength barbell gyms and affiliate gyms where they've got a client that's gotten injured or they're having an itis or this problem or that problem, and they want eyes on from the white coat, which is my doctor's side, but they also want the guy that's the starting strength coach that's not going to pull them out of the activity. I mean, that's the last ditch effort. I'm not going to pull them out of the activity because once they leave the game and they develop an injured mindset, it's so hard to get back into the game. It's so hard to get back into training. I know for myself, I've been out, the last month or so, I've been hit and miss on the workouts because I've been traveling, I've been working at the ranch, I've been doing other things, and so it's so easy to miss 2 days a week and so hard to get back into the routine. So the number one thing we want to do first with an injury is we want to assess it. We want to have a thorough assessment, and that usually comes from someone other than yourself. Now, there's a lot of people like Jonathan and other people that are learned that could probably do a pretty darn good self-diagnosis. They're pretty self-aware too. They have good self-awareness. They have a high intellectual and emotional quotient, and they can figure it out. And Jonathan knows enough to be dangerous. He knows a lot. I mean, your background is not health and fitness, is it? I mean, as in college? Yeah. But he knows a whole lot, and you're muted on me right now. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying that. My formal education is not. Yeah, as far as like college and things like that.
Right.
It came later in life.
Right. It's all after study. Yeah. Post college work. And so basically, the first thing is a solid assessment. So we want to assess what's going on. In that assessment, we want to make sure that we don't catastrophize the problem. We want to make sure that we don't automatically become the identified patient or the traumatized patient or the injured patient. And I'm using air quotes right now for the video. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard to do. But I'll just tell you, I mean, I'll give you a great example. About 3 years ago, I had about an 800-pound gelding that flipped over backwards on me. Now, I was 52 years old. When he flipped over backwards on me, he fell down, and he was going to fall directly on my spine. So instead of allowing him to fall directly on my spine, he was sitting on his butt, on his hips, on his flank, on the ground. And he was getting ready to fall back on me. Now, you got to remember, this happened in a split second, 2 seconds maybe. Well, I knew, I'd rather not have my spine ruptured and have the saddle horn go through my stomach, perforate my bowel or something. So I thought, You know what I think I'll do? I think I'll pull him to the left side. And he was small enough, and I was strong enough and fit enough. I mean, I got a 500-pound plus deadlift, squat over 400, strong in the upper body. I said, I'll pull him down, and I'll pull him to the left. So I pulled him to the left, and he landed on my left thigh and my knee. Well, I put a different saddle on him. I got back on him, and I rode him out, loosened him up, got the freshness out of him, and we went and rode him. But later that afternoon, my knee swelled up about twice as big as it's supposed to be. The next day was my scheduled day to squat. So that evening, I did a bunch of air squats that evening. I kind of checked the stability of my knee. I knew the stability was good. It was mostly all soft tissue joint injury. Maybe had a little bit of a medial collateral ligament sprain. I put ice on it. I stretched the injury. I also did a bunch of air squats. And the next day, I was scheduled to squat. What'd I do? I squatted 315, for reps. And so now I knew kind of exactly what was going on with my body. So I knew I wasn't going to hurt my body. But the point here is basically this. Most people, and I am not a tough guy. I'm a reasonably able, durable person, but I know a lot of other tough guys than me. My wife babies me when I get sick. She'll tell you I'm a baby. And so, she puts it. An average
gymnast, not a tough guy, maybe a baby. We got it. I've taken notes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so basically, but I knew the best thing for me to do to not get an injured mindset. And the other thing I had to be an example to my clients. I had to be an example. The next night, I taught a ladies class with 5 ladies in it that are barbell lifters. I mean, one of them's 69 years old now. And my wife was one of them. So I went in, and they were like, well, what'd you do? I was like, well, I squatted earlier today. I'm doing great. Well, are you sore? Yeah, I'm really sore. And it's really swollen. And it hurts. But guess what? I'm moving. I haven't had a single problem from that injury since then. But I believe a couple things happened there. Number 1, assessment. Number 2, don't catastrophize it and don't develop an injured mindset. Number 3, get moving and get moving early. Number 4, load it. Load the tissue. Even if it's with body weight, load the tissue. A lot of people ask me, how do you know you're loading it with the right weight, with the right load? And here's what I tell people. If it hurts when you first do it, but then the pain begins to improve as you do the reps, and then afterwards it kind of hurts again, and it kind of hurts again later that day, and then the next day you do it and it hurts a little bit less, takes a little bit less time to make it hurt less, too, as you get into the rep count or you get into the movement that you're doing. Could be a bike with loaded resistance too that you're doing. But as you're doing the activity, if it feels better while you're doing the activity and then a little bit worse afterwards, and this is with an acute injury like a contusion or muscle tear or any other problem that's related to those tissues, then that's a good sign that you're loading it correctly. So after you exit the body weight loads, then you start gradually loading it in a linear progression over time. And you can ramp it up as fast as you want to ramp that load up, as long as the symptoms don't go backwards. If the symptoms go backwards a little bit, in other words, it doesn't feel better when you're using it, it doesn't feel like it's improving throughout the rep count, then you may have loaded it too heavy. You got to back off. And so that's the fourth or fifth thing was load it. And then the last thing is as quickly as possible, purpose in your mind to get back to where you started and to exceed and excel through that. It's very psychologically powerful for you to say to yourself, I'm not going to allow this injury to stop me. I'm going to push through it. Now, I know I've been doing this long enough and I'm old enough, almost entering my 6th decade of life. I get it. There are some injuries that you never fully come back from. And so be it. But you can't predict that. And if you mentally give up, you have already predicted that. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. So don't try to predict the results. Just do the work. Dig the well before the well goes dry.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
And let the
That's a clip right there. Clip that out.
Yeah.
Note to the producer. Oh, wait, that's me.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah.
Let the results
it's like,
speak for themselves.
I think people forget that the same cycle, the stress recovery adaptation cycle that makes you strong, is the same thing that is going to return you to strength after an injury.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not the avoidance recovery adaptation cycle. Well, it's the stress recovery adaptation cycle.
I said earlier that it's really hard to do this with patients because once they see me in a clinical environment, they see me as a white coat, and now they've been medicalized, and now that they're medicalized, they when I tell them 2 days after a really bad growing pull that today we're going to do narrow stance front squats, or narrow stance kettlebell squats, or narrow stance body weight squats, or whatever it is, or sideline butterflies, or adductor stretches, or whatever it is, they can't wrap their head around that because that's not what they've been taught. And so I have to reprogram them. Now, with a gym client, they still have that same thought process, but I've usually developed credibility with them on the clinical side because they know my white coat background, and I've developed credibility with them on the coach side. And I've also shared my health background with them in some ways and tried to develop some analogies with them so that they can see that you can recover through injury and it's possible. And you can get back to where you were before or even better. I'm a much better lifter and stronger than I was before I had 2 shoulder surgeries and 4 back surgeries. I'm healthier.
Proof in the pudding.
I'm healthier today than I've been in 20 years. And so
what I think part of the problem is, and this probably ties in with the whole like getting a diagnosis and becoming the victim in the story kind of thing, is I think there's this tendency probably amongst the non-training demographic to think, what is the passive thing that somebody is going to do to me to help me heal from whatever this thing is? And then us in the training side of things are like, what is the proactive, active thing that I can do to help myself recover? And I think, cryo, you could buy every massage gun in the world, but there's only so many passive things that somebody can do to you to help you heal. At some time, you have to take a role in pushing through, to come back to where you were.
Yeah. I mean, the best way to restore function in a body element or in a joint or a region of the body is to do function. It's to do what that body part does. I've had back patients come to me, and I'm going to speak to the medical community here in just a second about what's going on in the medical community. I've had back patients come to me that have had back surgery, like a laminectomy, discectomy, just a little perk, just a little non-invasive.
Little nip.
Yeah, just pull a little chunk of, disc herniation out. And they've had their spine surgeon tell them, don't ever lift over 10 pounds. And I looked at that patient and I said, it's a pretty crappy surgery job. And they look at me and they say, what do you mean? I was like, if your back is that fragile that you can never lift over 10 pounds, then you are way below the machine capacity that your body was created for, the physical capacity that your body was created for. You are so living below your genetic potential, it doesn't make sense. And so
it's like,
but
the surgery brought you down a few notches. You're now debilitated more than before you came in for the surgery.
And most importantly, you have a fragile mindset. You have a fragile mind. And then that starts to fall into other areas of your life. I tell you what, folks, you're just not that delicate. You're just not that fragile. And the more we can develop the ability to do hard, and I'm going to give you a good example. I did a podcast, and you may have heard the podcast. It's my father-in-law. I'm not supposed to tell his age on podcast. But he is 82 this year. He just turned 82. And about a month and a half ago, he called me. And anybody who lives in Texas right now, I mean, you do, Jonathan, we've been in the 110s for weeks with no rain.
Maybe 3 months.
Yeah. So I'm out Saturday morning. It's about 5:30 Saturday morning, 6 o'clock a.m. Saturday morning. I'm getting ready to dig trenches for underground water lines to run to concrete troughs because everything's dried up and we're having to run off of our co-op waters. So I'm running water from the road back into the ranch. So I rented some equipment, and then I have a Bobcat, some other equipment. So my father-in-law calls me, 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. Hey, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm digging trenches. He said, I'm going to come and help you. I was like, no, you don't. It's going to be 112 today, Lon. You do not need to be out in this weather digging trenches and working out this stuff with me. He's like, I'll take care of myself. I'll see you in a bit. He comes out, and he works that entire day with me out in the heat. And we make sure we stay hydrated, and we make sure we work, we cool off when we need to, and we take breaks and everything else. But what if he said, I'm 82, I can't do that? The reason why he can do more than any 82-year-old I know and still fly helicopters for a living is because he does. And because he sees no limits in his mind. Now, someone might say to that, they might say something like this. Well, he's got limits. He just doesn't know it. And so, he just needs to be careful out there. But I always used to say to my mother-in-law, I would say something like this. So he dies going down in a burst of flames in a helicopter at 84. Is that better than drooling on yourself in a nursing home? And so when you put it in perspective, he's living his best life, and he's chosen to do that. So, again, we talk about this injured mindset. So what happens when an individual goes into the medical community, they get rerouted. They get rerouted from where we need them to really be in many cases. And it's not the physician's fault or the nurse practitioners or the PA. Well, it is their fault. I mean, plain and simple, they hold a lot of power in their hands. And if we're not careful, we can medicalize our patients, and we can catastrophize our patients, and we can give them that statement like, oh, don't do that again. You might break your back. How many people have been told that? Oh, you can never do that again. And we're told that, and we tell our patients that because of the Hippocratic Oath. We don't want to harm our patients. And we know that most people will do things they're not supposed to do. But I use some judgment with that. I'm very careful with that. First of all, I try to never medicalize things with people, never put limits on them, never put parameters on what I think they're going to be able to do or not do. I let them decide that through trial and error and outcomes. And so I think that that's important. And so sometimes you need a Jonathan. If Jonathan's you're one of his clients, he's your coach. If he's not, you probably need him as your coach. You need a good starting strength coach. You need a good barbell logic coach. Those guys are good guys too. You need a logical, rational thinking coach or medical provider who can say to you, no, this is the path. And then you have to trust, and then you have to do your part. Now guess what? Nothing's perfect. We make mistakes too. But the last mistake that I'm going to make with the patient is the mistake that under-potentializes their ability. I'm also going to do my darndest to try not to make a mistake that puts them at greater risk than they should be put at in regards to the healing process. There are some things that I tell patients, you're not doing that right now. You know, if you just broke, I'll give you a good example. I've got a patient, he's supposed to be non-weight bearing for 8 weeks after a knee surgery. No weight bearing on his knee. Well, he had a procedure called the MACI. It's a multifocal autographic cartilage implant. If he puts weight on that cartilage implant that we put a plug into his knee, it might disrupt the growth of that and dislodge it, and then it becomes a big chunk floating around in his knee. Well, we're not telling him to not weight bear because we don't want him to weight bear. We're telling him that because it doesn't match the physiological healing timelines. So there's a rationale for that. So that's what you want to look for in a medical provider. You know what? Don't be scared to ask your medical provider, why can't I go back and do body weight squats after this hamstring tear? Explain to me why. I'm paying you.
If their answer is just it's too dangerous, then you may have somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about.
Exactly. And then you might want to look at them and see if they actually practice what they preach. In other words, I'm going to tell you something. Physicians and nurse practitioners and PAs, they are not the experts in musculoskeletal healing. I mean, if you go to the specialty ranks like orthopedists, neurologists, neurosurgeons, higher level physicians, you know, and not that the other physicians are lower level, but I mean specialty physicians, they know their stuff. But even those guys, when you talk about, you know, SRA theory, or when you talk about muscle hypertrophy or soreness in a muscle, a lot of those guys haven't read up and they don't know what the newest science says. And in our business, we truly like to follow the science.
Right. It's kind of like I find the same thing with advice that I hear clients come in with from their general physician on nutrition.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm just like, citation desperately needed on whatever that advice just was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you betcha.
Well, I just turned 44. If I'm not mistaken, you are 55 now.
Yes, sir.
Right? So we have to pay more and more attention as we get older to kind of structuring our training to, you know, not put ourselves at extra risk. What are some of the ways that you've adjusted your training to do just that? And what do you kind of advise our, listeners that are in our demographic to kind of keep an eye on?
Sure. So I talk about just any 40-plus individual that I train because I used to train a lot of them. I don't train as many individuals today as I used to just for the sake of rerouting my time a little bit, but one of the things that is tough on the older population, the 40-plus population, and not all 40-year-olds are the same. So I think you have to you can pigeonhole people as much as you can, but you have to be careful because some people are biologically younger than their age, and some people are significantly older than their age. I mean, I've had patients come in that are 45 and they look 75. And I've had patients come in that are 45 and they look 25. And so a lot of it is based on what their biological versus chronological age is. But in general, here are some basic principles that I follow. Number one, you should be strength training, and it should be the foundation of any program. I don't care where you're starting in your fitness, strength should be your number one goal. Building a strength base and foundation. Whether you're young, old people need to be stronger. It does, we've talked about this before on another podcast. It has far-reaching effects other than making your body look good. That is the side benefit. It is a symptom or a sign of everything else. So,
one of our previous guests used the analogy that strength is the tide that raises all ships.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, strength training. I look at it this way, and I think I'm the only person who said this yet. I don't know. But I look at strength and the muscles in your body as one large organ. It is one organ in concert, working in concert in your body, in different regions of your body. And the more you use that muscular organ, just like your lungs, your heart, your your bowel, your kidneys, your liver, your brain, whatever it is, the more you use that organ, the more it will have its effect on all the other organ systems. Specifically, what we believe to be the fountain of youth organ, and that would be your endocrine system and your endocrine, part of your body. That's not an organ, but the endocrine system and the organs that are within that, your adrenal gland, your thymus, your hypothalamus, all the different, thyroid gland. So all of those glands that are in your body. So the best way that I can influence glandular health and endocrine health is through strength training. And then, we tack other things on that like nutrition, and I won't talk about that, but all those things are important. But so the number one thing is an older client needs to be strength training. Now, one of the things we have to consider, though, is that older clients, and when we're talking about older, we're talking about like 50 plus, probably more so than 40 plus. 40s are beautiful still. I'm telling you, 50s things change. And when I talk to 60-year-old athletes, it really changes. I know 60-year-old CrossFitters that are having their joints replaced now. There's been
Yeah, but you also know 50-year-old non-CrossFitters that are having their joints replaced too.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually no younger than that. But I mean,
yeah, me too.
What I'm basically saying, though, is this. It's not CrossFit that wore their joints out. It's cumulative trauma over time and age. And now, CrossFit may have contributed to that, but how many of those guys can go to the games with the joint replacement? I mean, there's guys that have done that.
Yeah.
And so now, if you look at them compared to their cohorts, my partner did a study for her doctorate, and it was on squatting. And basically the study was, do people who squat for squatting sports, performance sports, strength sports, or people who squat have higher osteoarthritis and arthritis rates as those who don't? And the answer to that question is no, they don't. If you take a 50-year-old male and a 50-year-old male and one who's been a power lifter all of his life, he does not necessarily have a higher osteoarthritis rate and a rate of joint damage than someone who's sedentary. In fact, the sedentary individual has less capacity, less quality of life, and less function. And so, sports don't generally cause the problems per se. They can, overuse can, and sometimes we do that to ourselves. So that leads us to this next thing. So strength training is key. Number 2, control your volume. Control your volume. Junk reps are just that. They're junk reps. Okay? Every now and then you want to, hey, I was a CrossFit level 3 coach. I get it. I had Bergner strength training. I trained with Bergner directly when I had his weightlifting cert. I get it. I did the endurance cert. I taught in some of the endurance certs. But here's the deal. Junk reps are just that. Junk reps are okay in a competition, but they shouldn't be part of your workout. They shouldn't be part of your training. Are we talking about, doing a workout, if we're talking kind of in the CrossFit context, like 75 snatches for time, that kind of stuff? Well, I think that you just have to ask yourself, of what value is it? Of what
right, what is my goal?
Yes, of what value is it and what is the outcome? It is exercise if it does not have a predictable outcome. When you strength train, you get stronger, you get more mobile, you get more able, you get more preventative of injuries, all those things. When you do high-intensity interval training, you get a better cardiac health, a better pulmonary health, you get better muscle mass. So there's all these things that we know. Now, here's the beautiful thing about some training models. You can make someone more fit just by putting them on. You can make someone stronger by putting them on a bicycle.
Yeah.
They get stronger. I don't know why that is, but they do.
Whole body strength you're talking about too.
And they're not going to get very strong, but they are going to get a little stronger. It's just going to happen because they're becoming more active and they're engaging hormones and they're more able and they got a better mindset too.
This is like the study where people had one injured limb and they exercised the other, and they still saw strength improvement carry over into the injured limb that they weren't even using.
We call that mirroring. Yeah, and here's another thing that's kind of interesting. They did a study with a bunch of college football players, and all they had these college football players do for, I think it was 12 weeks, was squat. Squat, maintain the same diet, but all they did was squat. and they took their measurements before and their strength and measurements after. When I mean their measurements, their body measurements, their neck size, bicep size, their chest
biceps
size. When they measured them afterwards, the large majority of them, everything grew. All they were doing was squatting, but everything grew. Their neck size grew, their arms grew, their chest grew, but they weren't specifically working those muscle groups. So again, the muscle system is one big organ that can have a massive change on the body's endocrine system and the other systems, the other organs. So the second thing to consider would be volume. Control your volume. Be purposeful about what you do. And when I mean volume, I'm specifically talking about how long your workout is, how many reps are in your workout, what your frequency of workout. There's really only three things we can control in training, and that is volume, intensity, and exercise mode. Those are really the only three things that we can change. Everything kind of fits within those three categories. Exercise mode would be, like rowing on a Concept 2 rower versus running versus the assault bike or the Rogue Echo bike or gymnastics movements or weightlifting movements or monostructural versus multimodal movements.
It's like, what tool are we using?
Yeah, exactly. What is the mode? What is the mode that our body is in when we're doing that activity? So, and the next thing would be volume. Volume would be how much of it are we doing? How often do we do it? How frequently? And then the last thing is intensity. In weightlifting and in strength training, intensity is how much load. How much load? In pure strength training. In power, it could be how much load, how fast. How explosive. Because power is an expression of strength based on time. And so it's, work over time. So, so in non-lifting, non-strength activities, strength training activities, intensity might be something like how hard do you go on the assault bike? How hard are you pushing on that assault bike? How many watts are you generating when you're on the assault bike or the echo bike? How fast? How hard are you pulling on the rower with each stroke? That's intensity, too. So you've got more cardiovascular, aerobic, anaerobic type intensity over. How fast are you doing burpees? How fast are you coming up and down? That could be intensity of the activity, too. So there's really
what's your heart rate?
Exactly. There's really only three things you can control. And so as an older athlete, I tell people, make it purposeful, control your volume, make sure that you have intensity in your program. Older individuals have to have intensity. Walking is not exercise. I'm sorry. It's normal human locomotion. It's normal. It could be exercise for someone who's never walked, who hasn't walked in a while. But once you adapt to it, it's not even exercise anymore. And then we go into that concept of exercise versus training. I recommend that older individuals like us, that we have training in our program. Every now and then I exercise. I get with my buddies and we'll do like an old CrossFit workout together. We're just having fun, man. It's camaraderie. We're just doing stuff, right? That's just exercise. It's really not training. Exercise is getting hot, sweaty, and tired. Training is outcome driven, and it has a predictable outcome. So,
I think the concept of all that is simple, but it might be hard for somebody who doesn't have a coach or doesn't know, has never followed a program that is has the right mix of those ingredients that you just talked about to kind of figure out on their own. So I'm not trying to turn this into a commercial, but this is the value of hiring an experienced coach or finding a program that is, that takes all this stuff into consideration, because the chances of you kind of stumbling in to the right balance of those things, especially if you don't have somebody with objective eyes on you to make sure that you're gauging your intensity correctly, it's kind of a crapshoot, honestly.
No, you're right. And I tell people this. I tell people this all the time. Lawyers, doctors, CPAs, engineers, professional coaches, CEOs, they don't have any problem hiring an expert because they get it.
Right.
And some of it's income too, but they get it. They get why it's important, because people come to them because of their expertise. So I always tell people, if you're going to barbell train and you're going to hire, you need a strength coach. You will save money by hiring a strength coach for a couple months to build a foundation and to get on the right path, because the path is gold. The path is where it's all out. Creating a mindset in those first couple months of your training is where it's all at, because that sets the direction. That's like the trebuchet. That launches you out like a catapult into the direction that you need to be going. I can't tell you, I've got a family that's coming to me. I've got a husband, a wife, a father-in-law, and a son-in-law. The father-in-law's the guy's other son, brother, or whatever. They're all four coming to me for barbell training. They've been doing it on their own for a year, and they finally decided they need some coaching. And so they're coming to me, and he said, well, we've been doing the system. And I said, well, I can either do like a coaching a form check on you, which is so much money per hour, or we can just start from ground zero, and it's so much money per hour, and we can do what's called a barbell startup, which is I act like you don't know anything. And he said, well, we kind of been doing this, and I said, all right, I'm going to treat you like you don't know anything. And I promise you, in that 2 to 4 hour session of working with those guys, they will learn more. And it's not because I'm a rocket scientist. It's not because you're a rocket scientist, Jonathan. It's because it's what we do. Do you go to the doctor for diagnosis? Do you go to the engineer to build something and put something together? Do you go to the attorney to get legal advice? Yes. So it's what we do. And if you have a professional coach, start with a professional coach, grow your knowledge base, and hire a coach that teaches you, not only gives you a fish at first, but eventually teaches you how to fish. And then you can do your own thing over time. And then you just need a tweak every now and then. Let me give you a perfect example. And then I think we beat this horse to death. It involves a horse. My horse trainer's
no farming, pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. My horse trainer's about to walk into the clinic right now. Actually, I'm going to treat his back today. But we were working cow horses this morning, and we were just talking about other stuff. And I said, man, I want to get better at riding. I want to get a better seat. I want to learn how to handle horses better, because I love to show cow horses. He said, hey, you're doing great. He said, but here's what's going to happen. He said, we'll do this for the next 6 months of you coming in and working with me a couple days a week, because I've got a horse back that he had for about a year to train. Actually more than a year, about a year and 4 months. He trained this horse for me. He knows this horse inside and outside. And he said, what's going to happen is, and for those of you that are watching the video, he said, you're over here right now, and your horse is over here, and this is good, and this is bad. So I'm on the bad side. He said, what's going to happen is you're going to grow to about there, and you're going to, unfortunately, bring the horse down to you some to about there. And he said, then you're going to meet in the middle. And he said, then you're going to need to bring the horse back to me so that I can take the horse and pull him away from you again and school him up again, get him back to that expert level that he's at, so that you guys can grow like that again. And that's what happens with coaching. And I explained to him that's exactly what's happens with coaching.
This is super convicting about our poorly trained dogs.
I raise stock dogs too, and guess what? My stock dogs are with the trainer right now.
Oh man, yeah. I'm jealous.
Yeah, and so and it ain't cheap, but you know what? At the end of the day, I could train him, and eventually I will be able to train my own dogs. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have a dog that acts better than a human does. And so, in regards to around lifestyle. So I think that's important to recognize, is that professional coaching, it's not about making a sale to folks. It's about putting them on a path to where they become excellent students, and then they become coaches themselves. And then they impact their community around them. And then before you know it, they're helping other people because they've learned. And it's all about learning, and it's all about being with the right resource.
Amen. Preach, Pastor Darin.
Yes. All
right. Well, I'll let you get back to clinic. Like I said, you guys listening to this, if you want to be first in line to get a picture of a cow on your fridge and then later have that cow in your freezer, send me an email.
If that's more than for you, then we won't send a picture.
Right. But yeah, seriously, Darin, tell everybody where they can follow you on Instagram, and if they're up in the Metroplex area, how they can come go to one of your clinics.
You bet. So you can, on Instagram, I'm at Dr. That's like Dr. Darin Deaton. On Facebook, I don't know what I am. I'm D Deaton or whatever I am on Facebook. You can, if you want to email me, you can email me at Deaton, DPT, that's dog, parrot, Tom, deatondpt@gmail.com. If you have a question, it's deatondpt@gmail.com. You can email me. If you want to connect with me, you're going to come in the Metroplex, you're going to be anywhere close to Fort Worth, just email me, contact me, and we'll see what we can hook up. I do take clients still. I do barbell training still. I do some coaching still. And I have several facilities. I've got 7 clinics where I've got racks and setups in every single clinic, so I can work in a bunch of different locations. And so
I love it.
Yeah, whatever you need. But Jonathan's the guy to go to, guys. I mean, I don't do too many podcasts outside the true barbell world anymore. And Jonathan's one of the only ones that I do because he's got a brain, and I like brains. And he believes in good evidence-based fitness, and it's not a sell. It's not the latest fad. And you know what? This I'll say one last thing. Here's the important thing for an older person. When you get older, investing becomes more important because you have less time to yield a return on that investment. It's the same way with our retirement portfolios and assets. Our body is an asset. Our health is an asset. You want to stay out of the hands of the fad fitness and the internet gurus and the influencers and all that other stuff. Jonathan, and what's your wife's name again?
Blakely.
Jonathan and Blakely are not influencers, even though they influence on social media. They are legit. They are the real deal. They are exercise scientists. They are people that understand the human body and can train you and have experience. And not only that, they're smarter than that. They bring other smart people around them to learn new things. And that's what good practitioners do in their craft. I don't know everything there's to know about fitness. And I don't know everything there's to know about medicine. When I stepped into the strength coaching world, years ago, I thought I knew everything, and then I learned everything I didn't know.
Right.
So use these guys; they're a great resource, and if you need to reach out to me as needed.
I appreciate it, man.
You bet, buddy.
Thanks again for coming on. Next time, hopefully, it's up at your ranch. All right, check. Have a good day.